Mortgage interest rates are falling. Americans' credit scores are actually getting better and better every year, and somehow luxury home sales are actually skyrocketing. In today's Market Watch episode, let's dive into some of the top real estate industry headlines from the last couple weeks. So let's start here. There's this group of billionaires in Silicon Valley who were planning on building this utopian city just outside of San Francisco, but all of a sudden, seemingly out of the blue, they've pulled the plug on this plan. I'm sure some of you guys remember this story. It was originally called the California Forever Plan, but I guess they've since rebranded it to East Solano Plan. The gist of their goal is to build this huge, safe, walkable, middle-class community. It's located in Solano County. The new community is right here. It's going to be about 17,500 acres in total. And they're saying that East Solano Plan, the rebranded plan, is a result of extensive community engagement process with Solano County residents. In other words, they did their best to try to get all the local residents on board with this utopian city. A bunch of people pushed back, and so now they're basically working with the community instead of working against the community. This rendering right here gives you an idea of what this community is going to look like. So row houses, lots of trees, really walkable. Apparently 4,000 acres of this community is going to be dedicated to just like parks and trails and stuff. It's actually not bad. Like if you can imagine living in an area where you can leave your house and just walk down the street and enjoy different amenities like this, it's kind of like living somewhere like New York. I know there are cities out there that are like this, but for me, living in Arizona, this is a cool concept. Everything out here is so freaking spread out. Another big selling point that they're throwing out there is that there's going to be 15,000 good paying jobs in renewable energy, manufacturing, and more as a result of this community that they're building out in kind of the middle of nowhere. There's been some version of this in the works for a long time. Maybe this one the locals will get on board with, but yeah, that's what happened with California Forever. Now, I know there's a lot of real estate agents who watch this show, so I know there's a lot of you guys out there who remember that whole NAR settlement that happened a couple of months ago. Well, some rules from that settlement are actually about to go into effect. For anybody who did miss it, the gist of what happened is back in March, the National Association of Realtors agreed to a $418 million settlement where the jury found a bunch of real estate brokerages that conspired to artificially inflate agent commissions on the purchasing and selling of real estate. It's a mouthful, and at the time it was very confusing, and it's still confusing to a lot of people today. Part of the proposed settlement said that commissions for buyers' agents would be removed from the NAR system, and home sellers would no longer be required to pay for both the buyer's and seller's agent when they sold their home. The gist of how it's going to impact sellers is that sellers are going to be prohibited from advertising that they're going to pay a buyer's agent commission when they go to sell their house. But the thing is, sellers are still going to be allowed to pay the buyer's agent commission. They're just not allowed to advertise that anymore. The biggest impact to buyers is that now going forward, if a real estate agent is showing a buyer a house, even if it's just one house, like they're just walking through a random listing with that buyer, they're going to need to sign a buyer broker agreement, even if that agreement is just effective for one day, saying, I, as the broker, am representing this buyer on this property. And the biggest question is whether or not buyers are going to now have to start paying for the services of their real estate agent whenever they're looking to buy a house, because that would not be cool, especially for first-time home buyers. You got to think, these first-time buyers are scrounging up all the cash to be able to pay for their down payment and their closing cost. They shouldn't have to also pay that buyer broker commission as well. Well, the good news is that that's not going to be mandatory at all. Like we already talked about, the seller is still going to be able to pay the buyer broker commission. So in those instances, there's probably going to be a lot of sellers who are still paying the buyer broker commission, especially if the buyer is someone who's on a budget, like a first-time home buyer. More than likely, going forward and for the foreseeable future, we're going to see the paperwork change in real estate transactions, but the mechanics of how the deals actually work and where all the money goes probably won't change all that much. The housing market in general has been in kind of a standstill for a while now, mainly due to the high interest rates, but apparently luxury home sales are actually skyrocketing. So check it out. It's kind of funny because we look at a lot of luxury homes here on the channel, and a lot of those really high priced houses kind of tend to sit on the market a while, but I guess deals for homes in the 1 million plus price range are doing really well. They led the country in June. They say there's a bunch of wealthy house hunters across the US who have these stacks of cash, so they're not really worried about the high interest rates. They're just paying cash for these deals and moving on with their life. They'll probably take out a loan through a refinance down the road once rates come down. What makes me feel decent about the housing market as a whole is that what they're saying is people with the means to buy these higher end homes are jumping in now because they feel confident that prices will continue to rise. What I like about that is that if we're looking at this population of people who's clearly very well off, many of them might be in the finance space or in real estate, these people thinking that the market is going to probably be okay is maybe an indication that the real estate market is actually probably going to be okay and we're not going to see some catastrophic crash. There's a bunch of news articles lately that are talking about how Americans are struggling to make ends meet, which is not a huge surprise. Inflation has been out of control. The cost of stuff like gas and groceries are crazy high still. But one thing that I found interesting is that Americans' credit scores are actually really strong right now. They say that the average credit score across the entire country right now is 717, according to the most recent data, which I'll tell you guys, I was in the mortgage industry for 15 years before I started doing real estate development full time, and 717 is a pretty solid score. We saw tons of scores from people who are in the 600s, and those borrowers usually would qualify for FHA loans to buy a house, so it wasn't a huge deal that their score was a little lower, but to me, 717 is actually pretty strong. Check it out. So this chart here tells us the average credit score by age. So younger people have lower scores. That makes sense. Millennials, that's the group I fall into, have an average score of 690. Kind of embarrassing. Come on, millennials. Generation X is up to 709. The boomers are doing good. Their average score is 745. And then the really old people over 77, their average score is 760. Here's kind of cool. They break it down by state. So like Arizona, where I live, is 713. California, I know there's a lot of viewers out there in California. 722 is the average score out there. Where else? We talk about Florida a lot. The average score in Florida is 708. But here you can see where the average score was year over year. April of 2013, about 10 years ago, the average credit score was like 690. And look, it just has climbed every year since then, all the way up until today when we're hovering in that like 717, 718 range. This makes me feel really good about all the first-time homebuyers out there who have just been sitting on the sidelines hoping they can buy a house soon. If your credit score is in the 700 range, you're gonna end up with pretty good terms on your mortgage when you do end up buying. Okay, last we need to talk about interest rates, you guys, and this is kind of a tricky one because there's a lot going on right now, and I typically film these videos about like 1 week before they're released, so it's kind of possible that things change between this moment and when you're actually watching this video. But here's what's going on right now. First of all, the Fed just met a couple weeks ago, and yet again, they did not make any changes to the interest rates, although Jerome Powell did give us all the impression that rates would probably be coming down the next time the Fed meets, which is in September. Well, that was a few weeks ago, but now all of a sudden we have all these people who are talking about a possible emergency rate cut, which basically means that the Fed could possibly be lowering the interest rates in between meetings, which is super rare and kind of crazy. There's a lot of people throwing around opinions on this matter, but this article breaks it down pretty good on whether or not the Fed will make an emergency rate cut. The biggest concern is that if rates are kept elevated like they have been for as long as they have been, then it could push the economy into a recession. That wouldn't be good. Another factor is that inflation is definitely improving, and because of that alone, I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen the rates cut. I mean, it's been basically plummeting for a few years now. They're saying that the biggest reason why there probably won't be an emergency rate cut at this point is it's just going to worry Americans. People will see that and they'll see it as a signal of a really weak economy. They might panic, they might freak out. Who knows? People could start listing their houses for sale, selling off stocks even more than they already are. My take on all this is that I think interest rates should come down. I'm pretty sure everybody feels like interest rates should come down. We're all in agreement. I mean, just looking at the housing market impact, right now you've got a bunch of people who want to sell their house, but they're not even considering it because they don't want to lose the low interest rate that they have. Then we've got a bunch of people who want to buy a house, but they're not even considering it because rates are too high. Whether the Fed does do an emergency rate cut in August, or if they wait till their September meeting to drop the rates, it's pretty refreshing to know that the start of the rate cuts are right around the corner. That's a wrap for today's episode, you guys. Remember to hit the thumbs up button down below before you go. That helps the channel out a lot. And don't forget to check out all the other videos on the Estate Media YouTube channel. They're putting tons of videos out that are all real estate themed every week. I'll see you guys next time.